Hello YouTube, this is Chris in Georgia, and today I'm going to be going over a couple of lightweight upgrades to my AR lower. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the V7's lightweight castle nut and end plate. This end plate is a QD end plate. They're both made out of aluminum, and they're supposed to be lightweight in comparison to your standard mil-spec components. Additionally, I'm going to be talking about the new titanium enhanced pivot and takedown pin set from BAD-EPS development. This set differs slightly from their steel set in the fact that it weighs significantly less, but it does not have the magnetic easy installation. So we're going to be talking a little bit about both these components, comparing the weights of these to the regular components, and showing the installation of that onto my lower here. So to begin with, we're going to install the front pivot pin. Before we can install the BAD-EPS development pivot pin, we need to remove the existing pivot pin. This is a standard mil-spec pivot pin that I previously installed. I'm going to need a couple tools to help me uninstall and then reinstall. To uninstall, I need a punch that's small enough to fit through this little hole that sits right here in this pivot pin. And what that allows me to do is it will allow me to push that detent in so that I can pull this out. Now the key here when you do this is to make sure that you catch the pivot pin, which is under spring pressure, so it doesn't go flying across the room. And there we have it. So let's go ahead and take a quick measurement of our mil-spec pivot pin. Looks like we got 0.285 ounces. Now if we compare that to our BAD-EPS development titanium variants, we see that the BAD-EPS development titanium is 0.155 ounce. So you can see that we are reducing a fair amount our weight. Now, I use the word fair amount. The reality is that overall these parts don't amount to much as it relates to the overall weight of a AR lower, but every little ounce counts, right? So a couple things that we can point out about these pivot pins that are different from your traditional pivot pins is first, we have this little divot. You can see that. Basically, that little divot allows you to line up a push pin, a bullet, etc. to push or get these things started, and it will hold that tip so that it doesn't, jut out and scratch your receiver. Secondly, you'll notice that the channel here is a little bit extended. The idea here is to make the installation a little bit easier than your traditional pins. And then finally, and this is very hard to see the naked eye, the pivot pin, the BAD-EPS development pivot pin, is just slightly longer. Let me see if I can stand them up next to each other. Again, the idea is that you should be able to press it in and get a little bit further push on it so you can get a better grip on it and pull than a traditional pin. Let's go ahead and install this. To install this, you're going to need some installation tools to help you. Unfortunately, the titanium pivot pin does not support the magnetic easy install that their steel counterparts do. And I believe that's due to the fact that titanium is not magnetic. I'm not 100% sure of that, but that is what I believe. So we'll begin by getting our spring and our detent ready. We'll use our tool to do that, just like we did before. Now that it's in there, I'll use this to push it in, and then I'll rotate it once it's pushed in. There we go. Now it's trapped. Now, just like the other pivot pin, we can put a little grease or a little oil on this. I actually put a little grease on it already, so I'm just going to put a little oil on it this time. The idea is to help minimize the wear on this, but more so to keep it from rusting and things like that. Obviously this is a titanium. Titanium doesn't rust, but now we want to be careful. Like the other ones, we don't want it shooting out. That little easy channel should make it a little easier on us, but it's not going to be perfect. So we still need to make sure that we don't allow our detent to shoot out across the room. And there we go. It is a lot easier than your standard mil-spec ones. That being said, I'm not going to try and kid you. It still requires a little bit of concentration, a little bit of effort, and a little bit of knowledge. If you're aware of what can go wrong and you prevent it, you should have no issues. The easiest way I find is just to make sure that I put my finger here as I run this thing in. It helps keep it from shooting out. Now that we have the pivot pin installed, we're going to go ahead and we're going to install the takedown pin. Obviously when we do this, we're going to have to take off the, or at least loosen the castle nut. So while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and swap out the castle nut and the end plate as well. We're going to make this all one maneuver so we don't have to do it multiple times. To begin with, I'm going to go ahead and remove my buffer spring and buffer. To do that, it helps to have a punch of some sort to press down this retaining pin. I use flat wire buffer springs so they can be kind of fun to get out compared to your standard buffer spring. There we go. Once that's off, we can go ahead and loosen up our castle nut. There we go. Now you got to be careful because these end plates are under spring tension from that takedown pin detent and spring. I want to loosen that all the way up so that I can then allow the end plate to slide back, doing it slowly. Now there's a little spring down there that you should probably be able to see right there. We don't want to lose that. Likewise, when we remove this buffer, we're going to have to remove the buffer tube in order to get this end plate off and the castle nut off so we can replace those. So I'm going to go ahead and do all that at one time. I'm going to use my punch again to hold down this buffer retention pin. Then I can just screw this off. There we go. Now let's do some comparison real quick of some of this V7 stuff. In this particular case, I got the QD end plate, aluminum, lightweight aluminum, and I have the castle nut, again, lightweight aluminum. And we're going to be comparing this to a Noveski QD end plate. And that Noveski QD end plate weighs 0.585 ounces. And the V7's lightweight variant weighs 0.170 ounces. 0.175 ounces. So we have a significant decrease on my end plate. Likewise, we're going to go ahead and take this BCM castle nut off. And we're going to compare it to the V7's castle nut, lightweight castle nut. So the BCM castle nut is 0.62 ounces, and the lightweight castle nut is 0.225 ounces. Again, we have a semi-significant reduction in weight. Now, while I have this spring detention out, I'm going to go ahead and remove the takedown pin. Unfortunately, in order to get that out, I need a little bit of gravity's help. Let me go ahead and just take that spring out. Really. There you go. So the standard mil-spec takedown pin weighs 0.21 ounces, and the Battle Arms Development titanium one weighs 0.115. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out about this is, like the pivot pin, we have the little detent here, or the little indentation rather, that allows us to use a bullet to get this started. Additionally, on this side, I don't know if you can see that there, we have a little lip that allows you to catch it with your fingernail a little bit so you can get a little bit better grip on the other side when you're pulling. So again, we're going to start with a little oil. I'm mostly trying to get that oil into this channel here so that the detent moves more smoothly through it. I'm then going to fit this in with that channel facing towards the rear where that detent is. I'm then going to push this spring back in to put that detent under pressure. And we're going to go ahead and test this and make sure that it is indeed in the channel, and it is. Now we can move back to our buffer tube and our castle nut. There's two ends to this castle nut. There's the one with these deep grooves, and then there's one with shallow little lips. The shallow little lips faces towards the end of the plate, as that is what you would normally use to stake your castle nut, whereas these are the ones that you would use on your wrench. So we're going to put those on first, but before we do that, we're going to put a little bit of grease on here. I use aeroshell grease on these kind of components because, well, that's the mil-spec spec. That being said, with these aluminum pieces, we probably don't need it as much, but I'll go ahead and do it anyway. I like to be able to get my castle nuts off sometime in the future, probably long in the future. Obviously, I've already had to take it off once so far just to replace these parts, so it's nice to be able to get it off. Now we have that on there. Again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to screw that on, and we're going to screw it all the way down. There you go. So we can go ahead and get our end plate on and then reinstall the buffer tube into the lower receiver. There we go. Now I need to install the V7's end plate, which is, where did I set that? There we go, right there. Again, we have a little lip here, and that's going to go in this channel on the bottom of our buffer tube, like so, with the logo facing towards the rear. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the buffer tube into the back receiver. Now, just like the first time, in order to install this buffer tube, we need to press down this retaining pin, the buffer retaining pin, and we need to twist this on until the buffer tube just covers the very edge of it and it lines up vertically. Just like that. See how it covers just the very edge of this buffer, or this buffer retention pin? That keeps it from flying out, and then it can go up and down from there, right? Once that's done, we need to protect our spring and make sure it's straight. Currently it is caught in here. Can you see that spring in there? Press that in so that that spring is retained. Before we tighten everything down, we can test this real quick. There we go. And we want to hand tighten our castle nut. Now that our castle nut is hand tightened, we can go ahead and torque it down with our wrench. There we go. It's that easy. Now the last thing we need to do, obviously, is we need to get our buffer and buffer spring back into our buffer tube. And there we are. That works. Our safety selector still works. Our takedown pin still works. And our pivot pin still works. We're going to have to work these things in a little bit, but overall, they do give a very easy to press and pull capability. We'll go ahead and wipe down the grease off the rifle. And we're done.